Welcome to the Speak Like a Leader podcast with John Bates. Welcome to the show. With me today is someone who spent nearly 15 years as a pro sports executive for multiple NFL and NBA teams, a global sports agency, and the NFL league office. And he's broken every premium revenue metric in Super Bowl history as the NFL sales leader. And he also opened a $1 billion stadium, helped save the New Orleans NBA franchise, and founded the San Francisco 49ers Talent Academy, where he became known as the Y Coach. Then he installed his leadership and high performance playbook with Fortune 500 leaders, founders and CEOs, MBAs, and professional athletes. And he's a #1 bestselling author of a book called The Power of Playing Offense. So that title sort of put me off at first. So when I sat down and talked with him before introducing him to you, I realized that actually I love that title now. And, I think if you know me, you'll know that I'm not a big sports guy. I'm a surfer, I don't watch a lot of football. But what I have to say is anybody who does anything at this level is somebody I want to talk to. And so Paul Epstein, welcome Epstein. It's my German. Paul, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much, John. I'm fired up to be here, and I'm super curious actually too. I've never heard that about the title and the put off. So at some point in the conversation, would love to unpack that, and that'll be a fun conversation.
Yeah, I'm happy to tell you about it, and I think we will have a lot of fun in this conversation. It's going to be really valuable for people. So what I want to start with is something that I work with people on a lot, which is, where did this come from? What was it that, because this didn't just happen and you had to really focus and work to accomplish all these things. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's a great question. And like you said, everyone has an origin story. And I don't just mean in life about formative years. I mean about even in the professional ranks and cutting your teeth at an early stage before you figure out what's going on around you. And so I, like every single person listening into this, had to make many, many mistakes and many missteps. And there were countless setbacks and obstacles. And I hate the word failure because to me, it is nothing more than a learning opportunity and an opportunity for growth. But the world does call it failures. And so what you said in the bio, of course, that's the social media side, if you will, in the sense of those are the trophies, those are the accolades, those are the achievements. I'm actually more proud of the fires that I've walked through than some of those trophies, because I know some of the pain and the tension that led to that. But John, if I could be dead honest, I think that I got very lucky based on A, what my natural gifts are, and B, the professional scope of my entry-level roles. So by nature, I've always had this gift of communication. You can call it a gift of gab. And folks always told me in my family, you're either going to be a lawyer or a sports agent, one of the two, because I was just always on fire at a family function and the whole deal. Now, I fall into sales because I went to school, USC undergrad, business, sales, marketing emphasis. And so after working at a Fortune 10 while I was in college, about a year after that is when I break into sports. And I am an entry-level guy selling tickets for a team, the LA Clippers, that ESPN called the worst brand in sports. This is circa 05. Sports Illustrated doubles down and says, you are the worst franchise in sports history. And I had to sell that. This is at the time that Kobe and Shaq are dominating at the Lakers down the hall at Staples Center. So to give everyone that context. Now, you may say, how the heck did you do that? And I think that's a fair question. I was one of 12 people that entered the organization in what I considered almost like a pledge class. I was the only person from those dozen to see the second month on the job. And I firmly believe, I mentioned the luck part of it. The fact that my gifts took me into an avenue of sales, I believe that sales is the best teacher of life skills, because you've got to be a little crazy to go into it. Like I
Yep.
signed up for a job of 99+% rejection. Who
Yeah.
does that? Who does that? And so
Right.
you learn a lot about leadership, but not necessarily at that stage of your career leading others. I think there's an even more important element, which is leading yourself.
Yeah.
Because how do you have the perseverance and the grit and the resilience to grind through a sales trajectory, especially if you're not the market leader, especially if you've got that kind of comeback spirit to yourself? And
Right.
that's where I cut my teeth. So happy to expand on the rest of the journey. But when you have that school of hard knocks beginning and you survive, and more than that, you end up thriving, you feel invincible. And so a lot of those accolades, a lot of those things you said in my bio were a result of the early fire that I chose to walk through.
Well, so take us to one of those moments when, like, go back to the you that didn't know how it was going to turn out, and take
Yeah.
us to one of those super dark moments and let us really feel what that felt like with you for a second. And then I'd love to hear something that you heard, somebody that shared, like how, like that dark moment when you didn't know
Yeah.
how it was going to turn out and you were ready to give up. And then what changed? What got you through that? There's got to be a bunch of those times.
Oh gosh. What's crazy about what you just said is you just described every single day in sales.
Yeah,
There's
right.
not only a roller coaster of a year or a month, every day is a roller coaster. You literally feel like you could do no wrong after you close a deal versus 10 bad calls in a row and you feel like the scum of the earth. So you want to talk about
Right.
darkness. That happens every single day. And again, I think it goes back to this mindset, as much as it is a cliche, of controlling the controllables. That is the advice that I got from
Yeah.
mentors, from coaches, from other folks in the industry. They told me, Paul, you cannot control, in this case, that your team is losing on the court. You have zero control over that.
Yeah.
What you can control is your mindset, your attitude, your energy level, the amount of effort that you put in, the way that you attack each day with a bias to action, all that stuff, the way you react to adversity. So somebody
Yep.
tells you to F off on a sales call. How do you respond to that? And I don't
Right.
mean to them. I mean, you should be professional in that case, even
Right.
though it's
Right.
difficult to. I'm
Yeah.
talking within your own mind. Like after
Yeah.
somebody tells you something like that, and then you go on to wake up the next morning, what fires you up and rekindles that flame to say that today's going to be a better day? So that's what I mean. You got to be a little
Yeah.
crazy to have the start that I had. And I got blessed that the way I'm hardwired is I'm an eternal optimist. So I
Yeah.
just think every no gets you closer to a yes. And that's a metaphor that applies to every area of life.
So, how did you go in the next day after a bad day selling for the Clippers when they were sucking?
Mhm.
What did you tell yourself? What was the thing that had you care enough about that to go back?
I got addicted to the wins. And what I mean by that is the no's over time, I became numb. I
Yeah.
didn't care. I
Yeah.
had a wonderful saying that was given to me prior to even getting in the industry. I went through an 8-week online program through Sports Management Worldwide. And I remember this really catchy slogan, SW, SW, SW. It stands for some will, some won't, so what?
Yeah.
And I took that to heart because that is the epitome of not only sales, but life. Like you think about your career and one job works out, but the next could be amazing. You think about a relationship, one could go entirely south, but you could meet the one the following day. I mean,
Right.
some will, some won't. So what? And
Yeah.
sometimes you got to experience a little bit of that bad. Take my funny relationship example, and you got to date a little crazy to eventually know what the one is.
Right.
And that's how I treated sales. And so through that some will, some won't, so what philosophy, you become numb to the no's, but you gotta love the yeses Because if you don't love the yeses and you feel the typical pain and anxiety of the no's, well, then it's just not a path that's cut out for you. So that's when I knew that it was for me, because I realized I can numb myself to the no and I can get obsessed with the power of the yes.
So you talk a lot about your purpose and your
Yeah.
why. Was there something, because I mean, this maybe developed after that time, and then I'll let go of the Clippers after this last question here. But
Okay.
what was the purpose? What was the why underneath that? Was it the community of people who were real hardcore Clippers fans? Was it the value of, I don't know, families coming to an event like that together? What was the purpose and the why for you that had you be able to succeed at doing that?
Yeah, I love that you're asking it, because the fairy tale version of that story, which by the way is not true, is that I knew my purpose from day one. And
Right.
in these early years of my career, I understood my why, and that's what powered me through each day.
Yeah.
As much as that is how I could speak about my life today and in recent years, that's not how I was thinking back then. Back
Right.
then, I was a young buck just trying to make a name for himself. And it was just an absolute brawl. It was the epitome of a scrappy fight every single day. That's the environment that I was surrounded in, not only by department, but by organization. That's kind of the brand of the industry, at least in those days. It
Yeah.
was very much that boiler room feel. For those that are listening in, if
Yep.
you've seen most recently Wolf of Wall Street, before that, there was Boiler Room, before that, Glengarry Glen Ross, and it was just
Yep.
one of those environments.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how it shook out. How did purpose fall into that? I'll tell you that now, reflecting back, I know why I never quit. I know why I never gave up. And that had to do with not wanting to let my late father down. So this
Mm.
is in my early to mid 20s, but I lost him when I was 19. And I
Oh,
always made a pledge to myself that I wanted him to look down every day and make him proud. And so now I've centered myself a lot around that
yeah.
prism, and every single day, no BS, man. I think of my dad every single day now. His legacy has become my purpose. But back then, I wasn't so clear on it. I
Yeah.
just knew that I wanted to make sure there was a happy ending to that daily story.
Yeah. Okay, so that's because I had a feeling that this hard charging, go getting drive had a basis in something like that. And I'm sorry that you lost your dad so early, but it sounds like you kept him close to you since then and have gotten even clearer about that. And I think that's a fabulous reason to be a hard charger, is to, have him be proud as he looks down on you. So then you went on to have some great success. And one of the things that I tell people is, when I'm working with my clients, it comes from a guy named Craig Valentine. He taught me a long time ago, John, don't make yourself special, because people can't relate to a guru, right? Like, everybody's looking for ways to distance themselves from you and think that they don't have what you have or whatever, just because you're the one on stage or speaking. And so you can't let them do that. Don't be the guru. Don't make yourself special. Make the process special.
Mhm.
And I've got to imagine that there are some processes probably that have to do with discovering your purpose and getting clear on your why and other things. Like, I don't want to put words in your mouth. What are some of the processes that allowed you to do what you've done? Like, open billion-dollar stadiums, save the New Orleans NBA
Yeah.
franchise, found the San Francisco 49ers Talent Academy. You know, what are some of the processes that have allowed you to achieve these big successes in your life?
Absolutely. There is fundamentally a process, and it is centered around one thing. And I'll share a quick story, and then I'll fast forward to what the learning from this story ultimately led to. So fast forward a few years from what we've been tapping into, which is when I was physically selling at the Clippers, got
Yep.
promoted within a few years to lead the team that I was once in. So now I'm the sales manager.
Uh-huh.
And in that team, it was roughly about 11 folks. Most were younger than me. There was one guy, his name was Eddie, that was older than me.
Mhm.
And in
Yep.
many ways, I looked up to him. So take the reporting out of it. Technically, he
Yep.
reported to me. I kid
Yep.
you not, John. I learned way more from him than he learned from me. He had been a
Yep.
previous business owner, and really, he turned into another mentor for me. So one day,
Yep.
Eddie and I go out to lunch, and I say, Eddie, I'm 6 months into this, and I look around the room and I think we've got some great people, some great talent. I'm fired up about the potential. But then I look at the scoreboard, I look at our sales results, and something's not matching. There's more talent than the scoreboard reflects. And he said, okay, well, I've got something that I don't know if you want to hear it, but you need to hear it. And that is, what are we doing right now, Paul? And I said, I don't know, Eddie, we're having lunch. He said, is it fair to say that we're breaking bread? I said, absolutely. Then he said, when's the last time that you broke bread with anybody on the team except for me? And that was it. Literally in that moment, I'd realized, holy shit, I'm an asshole. I don't have relationships with anybody on my team except for Eddie. No wonder they're not working hard. No wonder they're not charged up. No wonder they're not radiating this positive energy. Like, I just expected everybody to be a clone of me, and shame on me, because that to me is the golden rule. Treat others as I would want to be treated. I fundamentally disagree with that now. I think there's a better rule, which is the platinum rule. And that is treat others as they want to be treated. You need to speak their
Yep.
language in order to feel that deeper connection. So they would not only run through a wall for you or you run through a wall for them. It's about how do you lock arms as a leader so you can run through the wall together. And that was that relational nucleus of the atom. And so fast forward here, I'll be super quick on this. All right, I get promoted from LA to New Orleans, then New Orleans to Sacramento, then Sacramento to New York, then New York to San Francisco. So roughly call it a handful of promotions. And you know that saying, John, where you have an interview that's kind of a layup and they say, just don't throw up on yourself. You heard that?
Yeah.
Yeah, right? Okay, so my last cold interview, cold meaning I had no advantage. It was just, I had to beat out just another handful of finalists, just a traditional process, was when I got promoted from manager to director, LA to New Orleans. So essentially, my relationships that I built in my time in New Orleans, the people from the NBA that were involved with the day-to-day operation of the franchise said, do you want to come to Sacramento? Then the same guy said, do you want to come to New York? Then a different guy said, do you want to come to San Francisco? And
Yeah.
so through the power of relationships, one of which the ways is, of course, you break bread with people, but that's just
Right.
a metaphor. At the end of the
Right.
day, that lesson that Eddie taught me paid dividends because I essentially had this magic carpet ride through the sports industry based on the power of relationship. That's my process.
That's I mean, that is just so important. And if I can loop it back to some of the stuff I talk about a lot, and let's see what you think of that. One of my primary just things that I say over and over and over is communicating with and leading and inspiring and influencing human beings is not logical. Have you noticed? Yeah, right. It's not logical, it's biological. And when you understand the biology, you can make it logical again. But anybody who goes in thinking that logic should win, well, maybe in a world where should matters, but should doesn't matter in this world, right? And logic
Nope.
by itself, it's necessary, but it's not sufficient. It takes something more. And I think that is exactly what you're leaning into here when it comes to breaking bread with the team and having a relationship with the team. I think that, young Paul was running this team and just thought logically everybody's like me and we're just going to crank it out and I don't need to, right? And what if
A
it did?
100%. 100%. Yeah. And look, like this also, you brought up purpose earlier, which that happens to be the ethos of a lot of things that I not only believe in, but talk about. And we hear the word purpose, we hear the word why. Folks like the Simon Sinek's of the world
Yeah.
really made it mainstream to start talking about the why. And him, along with other thought leaders, have really paved the path around the neuroscience that you just described, which is part of starting with why. And not to get too geeky here on all the brain science, but there's two parts of the brain, the
Yep.
limbic brain and then the neocortex. One of them is solely responsible for logic and analytical. That's the process, the structure on how you're going to go about things. The other side is going to be more about the emotions and the feelings. And that is the part why when you start with what, you're only appealing to the logical side of the brain. But when you start with why, now it triggers that emotion and that feeling, and there's this pull effect. So this isn't just a
Yeah.
masterclass on persuasion or influence. This is a masterclass on communication, in the sense of how you build relationships. Is you've got to start with that emotional and feeling side. It's why, the funny example I always use is about Starbucks. Why are we crazy enough to spend $6 on a coffee? Like, why? It's because Starbucks, A, people love the environment, but B, it was their corporate philosophy and the way that they built the company, saying, we are not a coffee company that hires people. We are a people company that serves coffee.
Yeah.
And when you put it like that, that's why they have the warm feel. That's why you
Yeah.
want to go. That's why you pay 800% over whatever you could have done in your kitchen at home for the same, maybe even a better cup of coffee. Who knows? Point
Yeah.
being, the companies that pull us in by starting with why and triggering that emotion and that feeling, I think that's great advice for business and life equal.
Yeah. Yeah. And, and I like to point out to people that logical brain is wrapped around the outside of
Mhm.
the emotional brain. So for the logic to get through to the spinal column to sign the check or say yes or commit, it's got to go through that emotional place. And if we don't make the emotional connection, the logical brain gets stymied. We get yes, 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 no, instead of
Mhm.
yes, 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 yes. Right. So
Mhm.
now, so that's something that I think most salespeople know intuitively, but from my experience, not as many of them know that consciously. And I think it's just a great thing to know consciously. That's why these salespeople who are so good at putting people at ease and talking, and everybody goes, "Why? What does he even do?" Well, he does something really important, which is create that relationship that allows for a yes, 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 yes. And I gotta believe that one of the things that you do that with that makes a difference for you is stories. Am I right?
100%.
So what is tell me two things. I'd love to hear two things. One is a great story that some leader that you were around told you that stayed with you. And then I'd love to hear one of your what I would call one of your leadership stories that is an experience you had that teaches a lesson that you think is really important for others. How about that?
Yeah, no, it's great. So, starting with another leader and their story, this one's interesting because people probably think I'm going to some positive place, and I'm not. I'm about to share a story about in my leadership journey, decade and a half in the NFL and NBA. This was my rock bottom moment. And so I've already shared some of that success, the LA, and then starting to hop all around the country. And really, when I picked up on that advice from Eddie, the relational capital, and really just understanding the beauty and the secret sauce of people and leading yourself before you lead others, and culture, and creating that inspirational, more purpose centered environment. That was Paul on his best day. And then what happens is, especially in a revenue oriented environment like sales, where there's always a scoreboard, you get pretty good at goals and metrics and KPIs. So you're achieving all these company targets. But the danger in that is you get sucked into a place that I definitely did. And by the way, I don't blame my environment at all. I blame the mirror. I blame myself. But I started to drink the Kool-Aid, and I really started to feel like, wow, you achieve all this success. And here comes the title and the money and the responsibilities, and it's the LinkedIn profile looks sexier by the moment, and the outside world thinks that you're so awesome. And what that led to was when I was in San Francisco, I reported to the team president at the time, and he says, Paul, annual review, you're hitting the numbers, everything's great. And I got the typical when in sales, when you are achieving the mark, which again, we opened that $1 billion stadium. So these were no small feats. These were lofty expectations. And we did it. We, not me, we did it. And so he just said, attaboy, Paulie, keep it up. But something inside of me felt off. I didn't feel alive. I felt some internal tension. There was something burning inside of me where I wanted different feedback. And because I wasn't going to get it, I was just about to leave his office. And I said, can you just give me one thing that I can get better in? I just want to grow. And he said, absolutely, buddy, have a seat. And so in my head, I'm thinking, where the heck was this 5-10 minutes ago? But regardless, at least he was willing to offer the perspective now. And he said, Paul, I'm about to share a quote from Roosevelt with you. And this is exactly where you need to get better. He said, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And he kept talking, John, but I didn't hear a word because I went numb as soon as I heard that. And what I took from that is he basically said, your team doesn't think you care about them. Isn't it interesting that after a dozen years had lapsed from that conversation with Eddie, where I knew relationships are so important, but you get sucked into this race and you get sucked into the environment. And shame on me that I allowed myself to be, but that was the wake up call that I needed because I now knew that I sold out. And I now knew that if I wanted to be a leader that people would follow to the end of the earth versus being a manager that I wouldn't have even followed myself, well, I had to make some permanent changes. And I'm happy to say that I'm now, the happy story, ending to the story is now I'm one of the most sought after leadership coaches and trainers and consultants. And it's because of the lessons that I learned from my worst days, because I'm vulnerable enough and authentic enough and courageous enough to go to those dark places to say never again. And now I can sense it in others and I don't judge them as people. I just say, look, my job is to shine a light and make you more self-aware. And that's the lesson in this. The greater
Yeah.
your self-awareness, the greater your perspective, then perhaps you could avoid some of those pitfalls that I had to go through because, and frankly, that's the reason that I wrote The Power of Playing Offense. It was the leadership playbook that I never had, point blank. I was
So
taught how to hit goals and metrics and KPIs. I was never taught how to lead people. And so I just wanted to pay these lessons and insights forward because, again, I just never had it when I went through it.
well, let's talk about that because you wanted to hear what it was, right? And you know, it's one of those things, and I'll call one on myself here. Um, but looking at your LinkedIn profile, and there you are with the big Super Bowl ring and the big smile and all the $1 billion this and the started that, um, and then the name of the book was The Power of Offense, right? And The Power of Playing Offense. And I was like, okay, all right, this guy is like, you know, just no, take no prisoners, blah, blah,
Alpha,
blah. I'm so
alpha,
good.
arf,
Alpha,
arf.
alpha. Right. Totally. That's exactly what, like,
I get it.
right? My monkey
Yep.
mind's like, oh, great. I wonder if that book, right? But then I looked a little more closely and you and I got a chance to talk. And I was like, and you told me, I said, so what? I mean, it's one of the first things I asked you, what's up with this power of playing offense? What is that about? Right. Fully expecting it to be, well, alpha, alpha, I'm so great. You should be great like me. That was what I was kind of expecting, was not what you said. So let me ask you that question again, and you
Mhm.
can just answer it for everyone who's listening. So,
Sure.
what's up with the power of playing offense? Like, what do you mean by that, Paul?
Yeah. So the beauty of life is, to use a sports analogy, we're always smarter after things happen. In football, they call that the Monday morning quarterback. That's that
Right.
fan that tells the coach what they should have done the day prior. It's like, all right, dude, a lot
Yeah.
more difficult to be as clear in the moment. But then the next day, we're all a million times smarter. But that's
Yeah.
what I got to do when I reflected back on not only 15 years in the sports industry, but then taking that Jerry Maguire leap out of the industry, which I'm happy to talk about what led to that decision. But then I got to stress test a lot of these leadership principles, as I'll call them. And I wanted to answer for myself, is what worked in sports in these high performance environments, whether on the field, on the court, or in the boardroom, is it only applicable in those environments, or does it translate to a Fortune 100 organization? I had some collaborative efforts with the Navy SEALs. So again, I know that sounds like it's another alpha data point, but still, I think there's some
Sure.
performance things that we can all learn from, whether from
Yeah.
sports or from the military. You could just go on and on. But in business, I now started to crack the code after years of spending as a thought leader and coach and consultant and training in the leadership and culture space. I started to understand the through line, and I started to see very clearly that there are two types of people, both in business and the world: those that play defense and those that play offense. And so, if I could paint a picture for everybody, assume that defense is on the left side, offense is on the right side. So, on the left side, always on their heels. That's how they navigate through life. On the right side, they always seem to play on their toes. So they're making things happen. Even when something like a global pandemic hits, it's a step back to take 10 forward. It's a pivot to the right or left, and then they charge forward. They're always moving, learning by the step. Then go back to the left side, mindset, not to lose. So they're never going to take that big risk. They're never going to fail big, but as a result, they're never going to win big. Versus the other side, it's a mindset of playing to win. Are you always going to win? Of course not. But that's the mindset and the energy and the spirit that you enter each day with. Go back to the left side on defense. External circumstances or the market conditions always seem to drive their attitude, their energy, the way they approach life. That's where something like a victim mentality can come into play. Versus on the other side, offense, you operate on your terms because you have a deeper belief in the game that you're playing. Whatever the game is, business, parenting, school, you name it, there's purpose, there's passion, there is a yearning to take control of your future and live life on your terms. And this, I saw it in athletes. I saw it in the boardroom. I saw it in sports. I saw it out of sports. And that's the simplest way to describe defense versus offense. So it is how we can take two different approaches of mindset. One leaves you paralyzed, the other inspires action. And in times of adversity, at times like a pandemic or beyond, my belief is that offense is always going to win. It's always going to win because it's just a more positive and energizing and inspiring way to navigate through the day.
Would you say I mean, could I characterize that as a being reactive versus being proactive?
Yeah, if you wanted to choose one word for each side, I think those are as good as any.
Yeah, cool. Well, and you know, that I think is really fabulous. And so, I love the name with that deeper understanding of where it comes from. So, um, so you also have a podcast, is that right?
Yeah, Playmakers. Yeah, we just started second season, shifting gears now. It is 1,000,000% on purpose.
That's cool. So tell me, who do you talk to there and what do you kind of go after there?
Yeah, so part of my life mission and why I feel called into the space that I'm in. So I always say this, John. I long ago I had a job, and then in the sports thing, I had a career. And
Yep.
after finding my why and taking that Jerry Maguire leap, I found my calling and I stepped into it.
There you
And
go.
part of my calling is that I am on a mission to democratize purpose. I believe that purpose is the greatest gift that we can give ourselves. And I believe that everybody in the world should have access to this gift. And so the way that I unpack that, and this all lends into the podcast, is what I'm trying to debunk, in my opinion, the space of purpose when you hear about it, especially in a pandemic. I think it's being overused. It's kind of being a fad of like, hey,
Yeah.
it's this time out, and we all look
Right.
within ourselves, which I agree. And I
Yeah.
think that's super positive. But I also don't want to make purpose so mainstream that, unfortunately, the way I hear it a lot in the media or on social media is it feels like it's a North Star. And
Mm.
so if purpose is a North Star, the challenge with that is, how do I apply my North Star on Monday morning?
Right.
And who's providing you with that process, that
Right.
solution, those answers? And that's where I come in, because I am not about solely the inspirational purpose. I'm about putting purpose in action. That's why I created the podcast, Playmakers on Purpose. It's where
Yeah.
we reposition purpose from a North Star to a 365 way of life. It
Yeah.
is a lifestyle to live on purpose.
Yeah.
And that's when life starts to happen for you instead of to you. And so that's really the conversation. I essentially, from my network and a network of networks, you know how it goes having a podcast, 1, 2, 3,
Yep.
4 degrees removed. And you look
Yep.
for a tribe of people that believe what you believe. And I feel like everybody we bring on the podcast has this secret sauce, this hidden code on how they apply their own purpose the
Right.
day and the next day and the next, because that's prescriptive. That
Yeah.
I can't just say go out and find your why and it's this kumbaya love
Right.
story of North Star.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
just not
Yeah.
enough. That is not enough. That may have been the process I learned, and I felt like, well, had I not made this my life obsession, had I not turned it into pursuing my calling to serve others through the power of purpose, would my life have changed? And the answer is probably not, if I'm being
Yep.
brutally honest. So I realized that the gap is, how do you convert purpose to action?
Yeah. Boy, there's a lot in what you just said, and I can feel in you, and from what you said, like how I say it is, I almost died. I lost my dot-com company. We'd raised over $80 million. We went out of business in the dot-com crash, and I was so ashamed and embarrassed and hurt and sad and angry and just every terrible emotion that I almost died of an autoimmune disease. And in that in that moment of being at UCSF in a hospital bed, thinking I wasn't going to make it, I looked at my life, right? And like one might, and I realized that it had been really small and selfish. And I didn't want that to be what I died with. So I talked to the universe, I call it the big is. And I said, if you let me live, I promise that my number one thing that I will care about is just making a difference. I promise that'll
Mm,
be number one above
impact.
all else.
That's impact, making a difference.
And so I got to walk out. I wasn't okay for a long time, but a lot better now. But every day since then has been total gravy. And
Mhm.
I think it's because of that experience that I found what I do, uh, supporting leaders in their communication and all that. And it's my ikigai. Have you heard that word?
Oh, love it.
Yeah.
Japanese, a reason for being. Love it.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. And where all of the important circles of your Venn diagram intersect, right?
Mhm.
It
Mhm.
your what makes money, what people care about, what you care about, what you love, right? Like
Yep.
so and and it's such a great place to be. And I just want to say to anybody listening to the two of us, because I feel like we've found our ikigai. And I
Mhm.
feel like there was so long when I didn't know what that was.
Mm.
And if that's where you are right now, if you're listening and you're not at that place of having found your ikigai, your reason for being, your purpose, all I can say is that probably you're in the process of earning your wings for that right now. Cause
Mm.
I was in the just the woods, and things were not okay. And I was just felt like I'd been failing and failing and failing and failing. If I didn't have that experience, I could never do what I do now, which I think
Yeah.
is my ikigai. So, was there a moment like that for you? Was there this moment when you woke up one morning or you like, what was the precipitating incident to jump out of that Jerry Maguire thing.
Yeah. So August of 2016, there's a 2-day offsite retreat that changed my life forever. Literally, since those 2 days of being an exec at the Niners, it was about 20 of us that went off for this magical 2 days. We found our why. We unearthed our core values. We started to cultivate this action plan. And I just knew that my life would never be the same. I had no idea what it was going to lead to, but I
Uh-huh.
knew something special happened. And so
Yeah.
call that a Tuesday. I go back into the office on Wednesday and I'm just radiating this different level of energy. And people
Yeah.
are coming up to me from my team like, dude, what happened at the retreat? What was in the punch? Like, what's
Yeah.
going on? And I shared the experience with them. And that was it. But then the next day, one person from that group comes up to me and says, hey, that thing you did at the retreat, is there any way you could coach me through the same? And the next day, another person asked me. One led to two, led to five, led to 10, led to nearly 50 over the course of months through water cooler buzz to say, can you coach me to find my why? And that's
Yeah.
how I became known as the why coach of the 49ers. It was a
Uh-huh.
total passion project and side hustle because my day job was head of sales and biz dev for the Niners. That's my
Right.
day job.
Yeah.
But I fell more in love with my passion project than my day job. It got to a point where I became so obsessed with it. I felt called into it. And I said, if
Yeah.
I could do this every single day for the rest of my life, I will be the happiest person
Yeah.
on earth.
Yeah.
And it became non negotiable. Like people think that,
Yeah.
how could you ever leave the sports industry? What happened? What'd you run away from?
Yeah.
And I say, no, 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 no. You're thinking of it all wrong. I
Yeah.
found something to run toward.
Yeah.
I don't care what I'm leaving. It
Yeah.
was great, man. I
Yeah.
love the sports industry. I love the Niners, but
Yeah.
I stopped getting inspired by the day to day.
Yeah.
And so when you feel that gap from who you are and what you stand for and how you show up every day to who you want to become and how you want to serve, when there's a gap there, that's tension, brother. I
Yeah.
always say that purpose is the hard road. The easy road is to stay on the treadmill that you're on.
Yeah.
The harder road is to have the courage to get through that muddy water between current state and future state. I loved what you said there about people finding themselves. And so don't get discouraged. For everybody listening in right now, this is not a kumbaya motivational speech at all. This is actually just an awareness of appreciate where you are. Every step matters if you make it matter.
Yeah.
And then ask yourself where you want to get. Ask yourself what makes you come alive. Ask yourself where you get energized. Ask, how about this? Here's an action item. Ask the 5 people in the world that know you the best and choose them from different walks of life. So, a parent or a child or a teacher or a mentor or a business leader, whoever it is. Ask those 5 people and say, if you could describe me in one word, what would it be? And you're going to get a variety of answers and then keep asking until you start to notice themes and trends. So for me, I would get responses like, "Oh, you're the Energizer Bunny," or
Yeah.
"You're Captain Positivity," or whatever they would say. They'd make fun of me because they love me and they're in my inner circle, right? But
Right.
I
Right.
still can pick up on that. And then I would ask myself, is that how I'm showing up every day? And
Yeah.
if not, what would energize me where I could be positive every day? And I would just start obsessing with that so much
Mhm.
that eventually I just get curious. And curiosity leads to passion. Passion leads to purpose. I'll repeat that.
Yeah.
Curiosity leads to passion. Passion leads to purpose. It doesn't work the other way around. You don't just go find your purpose. You start by being curious.
Yes.
Curious about yourself, curious about tomorrow, curious about what you can do. Oh, but I'm too busy. No, you're not. If it's important, you make the time. What are you going to do this weekend? Can you do a self retreat? Can you go to some personal development workshops? Figure it out. Put in the
Yeah.
work. Purpose isn't going to come to you. You have to go play offense to get there.
Yeah, great. Yeah, you got to play offense to get there. You've got to go after it proactively and be open, right? And I think one of the
Yes.
things I really like about your story is it's one of those stories of being called forth, right? Like
Mm.
you had a good thing going. It's not like me where I
Great thing.
almost
Yeah.
died and like there was nothing else I could do. You were in a great situation, and yet you were open to what was going on. You were listening to your feelings. You were checking in with yourself. And all of a sudden, you realized, not all of a sudden, it happened over time, but you were open to that, and you realized through that experience you were being called into something else. And I did a talk a while ago about luck, because the theme at this conference was luck. And one of the things I love about luck is that there's a professor, and the long story short is he got a group of people, figured out who in this huge group of people thought they were lucky and who thought they were unlucky, gave them a magazine and said, count, sit down, count how many pictures are in this, bring it to the front, and we'll give you your money for participating, right? About 3 pages in, there's a half-page ad that says, there are 64 pictures in this magazine. If you found this, you can bring it to the front and we'll pay you, right? Something like 100% of the people who thought they were lucky found that,
Mm,
and 100% of the people who thought they were unlucky didn't find that.
mm,
All of a sudden, there's this different twist on luck. And one of the things that I think your story points to, that I'm trying to lift up and resonate with even more, is you were open to it, right? You were willing to notice something else. You weren't so focused on counting the pictures in the magazine that you missed the
yeah.
the ad that told you how many pictures there were, right?
Yeah, and it brings me back a quick quote and then a fast story on luck, because I love where you're bringing us. And so a lot of folks may have heard of the Seneca quote about luck. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. I'll repeat
Yes.
that. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. And I forget the gentleman's name, one of the original folks at Microsoft at the executive level. And he
Uh,
has this wonderful saying and analogy that I've always remembered, which is, if you think of luck as a bus, and so you're at a bus stop, you're sitting on the bench, and you know that every 15 minutes the bus is going to pull up. And the question is, do you have the fare to get on? And by fare, it means, have you put in the work? That is the preparation, because the opportunity is going to come every 15 minutes, but the fare is the blood, sweat, and tears of the preparation in order to say, I deserve that luck. And
yeah.
maybe today is not your day. Maybe that's not the bus for you. But what you know, if you study those that have not only, and I don't say this in an external facing way, that they've accomplished so much. I'm not going to talk about success. I'd rather focus on significance. So a great quote from Tony Robbins is, success without failure. Oh, sorry. Success without fulfillment is failure.
Yes.
Success without fulfillment is failure. And so what I've learned is that when you just serve yourself, that's all about success. And I was guilty of that during a lot of my climb. But then when I tapped into, well, I get to the top of the mountain and they give me this trophy. And by the next day, I'm back to the same old, and the magic wore off. And so these things we think we want so much, or these places we want to be so much, and then you get there, and 99% of the time it's a letdown. And I'm not trying to
Mhm.
be depressing. I'm just giving real honest talk here
Yeah.
about that's what happens when you focus on your own success versus when you ask yourself, well, that was a time where we were at the top of a mountain and it lasted and it sustained and I still get charged up by it. It's
Yeah.
probably because you were serving others. It's probably because there was contribution. It's probably because there was impact. It's probably because you were chasing significance instead of chasing success. And so when
Mm.
people ask me, how do I find more luck? How do I get the fare to get on that bus? You pursue significance over success.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love that. Yeah, that's some great advice right there, Paul. Thank you. And I want to be respectful of our time. I know we got to wrap up here, but you've got a gift for people, and they can get it at whyinstitute.com/purpose. I'll say that again. We'll put it in the show notes. Whyinstitute.com/purpose. And by the way, you can find Paul at paulepsteinspeaks.com. So we'll put all that in the show notes. But tell us about this free gift.
Yeah. So in under 5 minutes, no joke, in under 5 minutes, you can discover your why. You will have a why that comes out of this assessment in 5 minutes. And it is so rich in detail because it's not only just your one word why, it's developed by my partners at the Why Institute, but more importantly, it gives you these resources on how you bring it to life. Remember that purpose in action. So it'll tell you, hey, here are some of the strengths of your why. Here are some of the challenges of having that why if you overexert it too much, or here's how it can come across to others. But here's some of the opportunities with your why. Here's how you can apply it to your business, to your career, to your life as a parent. So it literally breaks down almost by what hat you might be wearing in life. And it tells you the superpower of that why. And the last thing I'll share on that is once you take this assessment, just know that the way I think about the connection between why and purpose is why is the kickoff to the game. You have to know your why in order to center yourself, in order to have a compass, so to speak. But then once you have that compass, now you ask yourself, well, where do I go? How do I start to apply that? And that's where the 365 purpose lifestyle comes in. Ironically enough, John, that's why I'm writing my second book about On Purpose, which literally the subtitle is a 365 guide to align your head, heart, and hands. And my belief is when you can align your head, heart, and hands, you can create a 365 lifestyle. So then after starting with a compass and an anchor like your why, you can then start to put it in play 365 based on living your life on purpose.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Fabulous. Well, this is great stuff. Is there anything I didn't ask or that you'd like to say just to take us out, Paul?
Now, this was some advice that I've learned through many missteps, as you've heard through my journey. But for everybody out there that is so focused on what you do, and we tie our identity often to what you do. Think about this. I was in the sports industry. If somebody had a career-ending injury, but that's all that they've done their whole life, they were an athlete. Is their identity solely that they're an athlete? Or is it something that's behind their rib cage that is more deep about who they are? And that's really how they can show up at their best. And so what I want to share with folks is to the best of your abilities, none of us are perfect. I am far from perfect, but hopefully I've been vulnerable enough to share some of those imperfections today. When you can prioritize your why and your who before the what, that is a winning game plan. And in the words of Dr. Gary Sanchez, who's the CEO of the Why Institute, he's becoming a good friend very fast. He has a great saying, and this will be my grand finale. He says, when you know your why, your what has more impact because now you're stepping closer to your purpose.
Yeah. All right.
And so that's it for everyone to find your why, whyinstitute.com/purpose, 5 minutes, go do it. I invested in them for everybody listening in. So it is on me, a gift on purpose.
Well, thank you, Paul. And thanks for the gift of your time and your insights. You've had quite a ride so far. I think it's great that you got pulled out into an even higher level of service. And I'm your partner in transforming the world for the better. And I'm glad you're out there, and I'm glad you came and spent this time with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And thank you for joining us. This makes no difference without you. So I'm glad you're there. If you'd like to share this with people, please do. If you'd like to recommend guests for me, if you'd like to know, let me know other topics you'd like me to address. I'd love to hear from you. And go be great. Thank you for joining the Speak Like a Leader podcast. Go be awesome.